And now, at long last, in our not very deep trek into feminist film theory, it is time to talk about Michaela Baines, the most well-rounded and worthwhile character in the Transformers movies. What?
I don't play.
When people think about women in the Transformers movies, the first thing that comes to mind after that Romeo and Juliet lost scene from Age of Extinction is Megan Fox. But Megan Fox's character, Michaela Baines, get it? Michaela Baines, is just the beginning of discussion where women in these movies are concerned. Because the first movie, easily the most cohesive of any of them from a screenplay perspective, actually has some comment on the way women are treated by men who underestimate them, by being overqualified for a thankless job, by being dismissed by one's superiors in the workplace because they don't take you seriously because you're a girl. Given that over the last decade these movies have become an emblem of all that is backward and misogynist in the world, people have forgotten that the first movie is weirdly sympathetic to its female characters. On paper. But this sympathy to the female characters in the screenplay is undermined by the way the women are framed by the camera, and the framing gives the audience a different takeaway than what we see on the page.
It squirts the fuel in so you can go faster.
Oh. I like to go faster.
Let's recap the plot of Transformers 1. A down-on-her-luck working-class girl with a gift at hot wiring and fixing cars gets swept up into a godlike clash of space car robots by a hapless idiot.
I just put in that light there, in that disco ball, so the light reflects off the disco ball.
She is obviously skeptical at first. Why would the alien space robots have any use for such a worthless dummy? He seems incapable of even looking after himself, and she even has to save him a couple of times.
He's gonna kill me!
But this girl has problems of her own. Not only do the men in her life not respect her,
Hey, how about you let me drive?
Oh, no. This is not a toy. These 22s.
Romantic friends do this. I mean, I'm not that friend. I mean, I could be.
You, in the training bra, do not test me.
her dad is in jail and she herself has a juvie record for aiding and abetting.
You know those cars my dad used to teach me to fix? Well, they weren't always his.
You stole cars.
But eventually, she learns to see her involvement with the alien robots as a chance to use her bravery and her automotive skill set, which everyone has always underestimated and not appreciated because she is a girl, to not only get her juvenile record expunged, and to redeem her car thief dad, but to help the alien space robots save the world from the other alien space robots.
You think I'm shallow? Huh?
I think there's a lot more than meets the eye with you.
Michaela, the only human character with an interest in cars.
You've got a high-rise double-pump carburetor. That's pretty impressive, Sam.
The only character with even some approximation of a backstory.
I have a record because I wouldn't turn my dad in.
The only character who self-actualizes, not because others tell her to, not because she is given instruction, but because she realizes her self-worth on her own.
Oh, God, I can't even tell you how much I'm not your little bunny.
A few years ago, back when we were first kicking around the idea of this project, I asked Twitter to describe Michaela's character. And the results were telling. Audiences thought it was a given that Michaela was worse written or acted than any of the other characters in the movie when she very clearly wasn't. But people didn't notice that there was indeed more than meets the eye because the camera was sending a different message than the script was, namely that Michaela is not here as a character who grows and changes over the course of a narrative, but as gratuitous eye candy. If the theme of the movie is no sacrifice, no victory,
No sacrifice, no victory!
Sam has never sacrificed anything, which Michaela actually points out.
I have a record because I wouldn't turn my dad in. When have you had to sacrifice anything in your perfect little life?
But Michaela has. Michaela's skill set, backstory, and character arc fit much more neatly with the theme that the movie is at least going for than the main character himself. So Transformers 1 isn't so much Sam's coming-of-age story as it is Michaela's. So given this character, whom everyone underestimates but is also the only character with any interest or history with cars, something that might have even led her to, I don't know, discover something about Bumblebee, like look under his hood and go, there's something different about this engine. I think your car might be an alien robot. Maybe have her established skill set pay off in some narrative way, but it doesn't.
Just pop the hood.
And that image of Michaela leaning over the car, talking about how men don't like that she has skills as a mechanic because of her gender and the way she looks.
That's weird. I just wouldn't peg you for mechanical.
Well, you know, I don't really broadcast it. Guys don't like it when you know more about cars than they do.
All while Sam leers at her and listens to not one word she is saying. This is what we might call dissonance of framing. The text is saying one thing, the framing is saying something else. What do people remember from this scene? Do they remember what Michaela says?
Guys don't like it when you know more about cars than they do. Especially not Trent. He hates it.
Or do they remember the way Megan Fox's body was shot? Michaela is emblematic of the problem with these movies. Long movies that move so fast that the story is almost impossible to follow, so aesthetic impressions get weighted much more heavily than thematic or narrative ones. And when you have a director who is much more interested in frame for frame's sake rather than using the camera to emphasize the storytelling, the narrative, the character, and theme are at war with the aesthetics. The text says one thing, the camera says another, and because this is a visual medium, what the audience remembers is what the camera tells them. Michaela is talking about how people don't see her as anything but a pair of TNA, but all the while the camera is conveying to the audience that this is her value. And unless you're a pedant like me who's obsessed with fixing the flaws of the screenplay because it had potential, damn it, that's all the audience takes from it. On the other end of the spectrum are the women that are not frames of object of desire, namely Sam's mother, played by Julie White.
Were you masturbating?
Judy.
And Director of National Intelligence Charlotte Meaning, played by Frances McDormand.
I don't care who you are. If you breathe a word of what you've seen here, you will do time for treason. Do you understand me?
White's character is almost entirely played for comedy.
Hey, Professor, I'd do anything for an A.
All right, Grace, Slick, we got some snacks.
You have to call it that word. If that makes you uncomfortable, you can call it Sam's happy time.
March, young lady.
I love it when you call me young lady. You dirty old man.
Just been a weird night. I've had a little bit to drink.
No.
But McDormand's character seems to resent the fact that she is a woman at all. See her reaction when she is called ma'am or madam.
Are you
Yes, ma'am, I am.
not? Stop with the ma'am. Enough with the ma'am. Do I look like a man?
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, yes.
Feminism.jpg, am I right? But don't worry, here comes John Turturro to put her, and all women, in their place.
Moving up in the world, huh? Your booty looks excellent.
Women in these films are on two extremes. Props of beauty shot in the same manner as Victoria's Secret models, and one actual Victoria's Secret model.
This is your new lucky bunny.
Hey, it's almost like our director had directed Victoria's Secret commercials before. And sexless butts of jokes. The only noteworthy exception to this is NSA contractor Maggie Madsen, played by Rachel Taylor in the first movie, who was the person who discovers that the Decepticons are trying to hack into national security networks.
There is nothing on Earth that complex.
What about an organism? A living organism, maybe some kind of DNA-based computer.
No one believes her, so she breaks all of the laws and seeks out her friend, Glenn, played by Anthony Anderson, to help her figure out what is going on. This doesn't really go anywhere and ultimately leads the two to discover nothing of consequence and lands them in jail, where there is this nothing scene in which Anthony Anderson eats the whole plate.
I ate the whole plate.
Now, for the sake of argument, we're going to ignore the fact that on the surface, given that this is the first movie and no one knows about the robot aliens yet, her proposal is absurd.
What about an organism?
What if it was a witch? What if this is all a projection? What if we're in the Matrix? If the moon was made of ribs, would you eat it?
And I know that sounds crazy.
That's enough.
Ignoring that, it is pretty clear that there is some gender-motivated bias in the way Voight's character talks to her.
If you don't get a filter on that brain mouth thing, you're gonna be off the team. You understand?
But the dismissive way that her superiors treat Maggie isn't the only comment on women in the workplace buried in this movie.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah, can you wrangle me up some ding-dongs, darling?
During the scene while the Decepticons are trying to break into Air Force One, an Air Force One Secret Service woman complains about having to be overqualified to effectively be a glorified stewardess.
Join the Air Force 3 man ding-dongs. They'll be in storage.
Maggie is exceptionally beautiful, sure, but she's not framed as a commodity like Michaela is, nor do her male colleagues treat her as anything but an equal. Only her superior, the Secretary of Defense, played by Jon Voight, does the go away little girl the big men are talking thing. This mirrors Michaela being dismissed for her skill set in a male-dominated field, cars, yet framing her like she is in a car commercial. This is even more overt in the third movie, when Bay combines the camera work with some dialogue to compare Carly to a literal car.
Look at the curves. Elegant, isn't it? Beautiful. Built to evoke the body of the ideal woman.
The first movie constantly subverts the gender status quo, but then reinforces it by way of framing, which objectifies or undermines the female characters. That's what I find interesting about the first movie. It acknowledges that in a sphere like this, the sphere of technology, the military, and automotive mechanics, a woman is presumed to be lesser, a secretary, or likely way out of her league. This is in part due to the tendency for people to see young, beautiful, or feminine women as empty shells. Props, you might say. And nowhere is this more clear than in the chimera that is Carly.
What is that?
This is your new lucky bunny.
The screenplay for Dark of the Moon was mostly complete before Megan Fox was fired, so Carly hits all of the beats that Michaela's character had built up to, ignoring the weird, was a White House intern introduction that is just kind of slapped on. The fact that Carly is a curator of automobiles for a rich guy makes sense for Michaela. Michaela's skill set is paying off in the new economy, and Sam's is not, because it's mostly non-existent. He has built up no professional contacts, he is a nervous wreck, and also a total douche.
Sensei.
And then the film ends with this.
Ooh, wings.
Which does not make sense for these two characters after only one movie of build-up. This was supposed to be the same character from movies 1 and 2. If you look at it in the sense that it was a deliberate story choice to replace Michaela with Carly, which, it wasn't, but let's pretend that it was, in a narrative sense it's even more depressing. Because the main arc between Sam and Michaela in Transformers 2, really Michaela's only arc in 2, because this one was mostly written by Bay himself because it was in pre-production during the writer's strike of 2008. Tangent! Is that Michaela wants Sam to tell her that he loves her.
I adore you.
That's not the word that I want to hear right now.
What are you talking about? It's the same word as the other word.
It's not the same word.
And neither is willing to say it first. And eventually Sam wins.
Listen to my voice, I love you.
Maybe by dying. There are some begrudging proclamations of love.
I took all this for you to tell me that you love me.
You said it first.
But the real kicker? It's not that he can't admit it because men and commitment. It's because he doesn't love her. That she is the trophy, she is the ward, and therefore disposable. And therefore in movie 3, he has another disposable, beautiful girlfriend.
Get in the car, please.
Another hood ornament, another decoration. Who she is does not matter because she is not a person to Sam. Nothing is real to Sam. Everything is an object because he is so navel-gazing, self-obsessed, lacking in empathy and detached from reality.
Okay, listen, I'm a victim.
Everything and everyone, the Autobots, his girlfriend, is an object to be used and disposed.
She'll always be my first car.
And if we take Michaela and Carly as two separate characters, which, for the sake of narrative argument, let's...
What if she dumps us like the last girl?
She was mean. You like her.
Michaela is a far more rounded and realized character than Carly, even up to the fact that she dumps her boyfriend because, after putting up with him for so long, she realizes that he, like everyone else in her life, does not love her.
You said it first.
To him, as to everyone, she is not a person, but an object, a trophy, a hood ornament, a reward. So she leaves him off-screen. We see this mirrored in the real-life adventures of Megan Fox as well, in a metatextual sense, by booting Michaela and shoving in a replacement who is not set up nor even works from a story standpoint. This is the message that Bay was sending Fox. You are an object, you are disposable, you can be replaced.
What if she dumps us like the last girl?
She was mean. You like her.
The first film brings up issues of gender inequity and how men often don't take women seriously because they are objects to them.
Why doesn't my little bunny just hop in the back seat?
But at the same time objectifies Michaela to the point that for most viewers, she is impossible to take seriously because she is so impossibly beautiful, so impossibly dressed, so objectifyingly framed. Her impossibility is not in the text, but in the framing. Michaela Baines is the embodiment of what remains with the audience through cinematic language. Framing and aesthetics supersede the rest of the text. Always, always, always.